Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. We're back here after the Labor Day long weekend, and we're here talking with executive members of Women in Canadian Criminal Defense, or the very cool WICCD acronym there. So, first of all, let's thank you all for joining us. Let's start with Amanda. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll get going.
Fabulous. So thank you so much for having me. I'm JP. So my name's Amanda Ross. I'm a criminal defense and a professional regulatory and discipline lawyer based in Toronto, Ontario, and I am the Ontario Vice President of WICCD.
Now we have Hamna.
Hi, JP. Thanks for having me. My name's Hamna Anwar. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, Lindsay Law, based out of Toronto. I'm also part of WICCD, and I am the co-chair of diversity and membership with Tanya.
Perfect. Kyla.
Hello, I'm Kyla Lee. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Vancouver. I limit my practice to driving offenses, and I am the British Columbia Vice President for WICCD.
Thank you. Sveta.
Hi, my name is Shweta Tejpal. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. My office is in Mississauga. I'm the assistant secretary for WICCD.
And finally, Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya Kent. I'm a sole practitioner with my own criminal defense practice, practicing in solely criminal defense. And I'm on the WICCD executive along with Hamna for membership, the VP of membership and diversity.
Perfect. So nice to meet all of you. And I think maybe we could get started. Maybe we'll go to you, Amanda. Could you tell us a little bit about WICCD and I know I just mentioned membership there and how many people you have and who you represent and what are some of the goals of the organization?
Absolutely. So WICCD, or Women in Canadian Criminal Defense, is a nationwide organization that the people on the executive, including me and a few others who are missing, started a few years ago to give a voice to women and female identifying or gender nonconformist defense lawyers practicing in Canada. So we've opened up our membership to lawyers, to paralegals, to law students, and to paralegal students. And the idea is to form a place of support and collegiality and mentorship and I guess advocacy for the people that we represent. And so that'd be both our membership, and we want to advance our interests and provide support to keep these people in the profession because there's a huge amount of turnover in criminal defense generally, and we see women and non-gender conforming individuals leaving, I think, at a much higher rate than we typically see men leaving the profession for a lot of reasons that I think we'll talk about tonight. So we saw a hole, I guess, in terms of the market and the community for representing ourselves. So we wanted to come together and do that. And we also do educational seminars. We do a lot of policy and advocacy work. We have our first intervention at the Supreme Court coming up over the next little while. So that's very exciting. So we have a lot of exciting and I think important stuff going on in the mix.
Perfect. And all about those exciting things there, Hamna. Maybe you can share some of the different like CPD events and various video series that you have, but anything that anyone else listening could find more about WICCD.
Yeah, absolutely. So WICCD wants to inform the public as well as people who are part of the bar for provide support and educational information that's readily available. Firstly, there is no membership fee for our organization, and all of our CPDs are free. We have a bunch of YouTube series. One of them is recently renamed She Cares, as well as Find Your Niche, where um, lots of lawyers are interviewed about their niche areas and guidance on how other young lawyers can participate in those areas and excel. Other than those type of casual niche events and series, we also have lots of mentorship opportunities within WICCD, which was a key part of, I think, the reason why we wanted to form WICCD was there was a lack of mentorship for young women, and that's where lots of women were leaving. So we do have a formal mentorship program, but more importantly, I think we have a very amazing listserv. Every day we have women and gender non-conforming individuals posting on the listserv asking for help. That could be for a legal point of view or just emotional support sometimes for the way they've been treated in court by a client or with ethical issues. And I think that's been really heartwarming because there's lots and lots of support on our list, or people will just jump backwards and share their vulnerability just to make another person feel comfortable. And I think that's what was lacking for younger women who may feel like outsiders in the profession. So that's one of the things we're really proud of at Wicked.
And I guess on that point, then, Kyla, having sort of a space, I know there's other listservs, the Criminal Lawyers Association, for example, and other places. How do you think, in terms of that mentorship component or being able to have communications within Wicked in that capacity? How is that different? Or how do you think maybe in terms of younger women who are entering the profession that it's more of a safe space to kind of have those discussions?
I mean, it's absolutely more of a safe space because you have a group of people who, probably whatever as a young lawyer you're going through, whatever, you perceive as discrimination based on your gender you might be experiencing. You have this community of people who've been there and know how to handle it and can also just empathize. Sometimes it's a lot of the stuff on the listserv, I think, that I find most valuable is just the warmth of the community. When things are tough, you can reach out and you get dozens of messages back from people who are, supportive and understanding. And it really helps make you feel like you're not alone. And in criminal defense, a lot of us are, sole practitioners or working in very small firms. So you don't have these big networks of people that you can come to, to say, this happened to me, please, just listen to me and give me some support. And so Wicked Listserv is an amazing place to get that.
And Sveta, what about you in terms of what you found within the organization, what you've been able to get out of it, and anything you can share about the benefits, in addition to what we've already talked about, to anyone else who may be listening, thinking about joining?
Well, I think it's the diversity component. Wicked is composed of people from different backgrounds and jurisdictions. And I know, females who feel like they can connect to other people's experiences, whether you're, from a South Asian background, whether you're from, an African background. It just really gives that comfort for our individuals who may be facing those same issues, for example, to reach out to each one of us and say, hey, this is an issue. What do you think I should do? And that's where the mentorship program has been great. Females who are volunteering their time to mentor young lawyers. It's not just so much about, dealing with the substantive, like the criminal law aspect. It's still like the day-to-day things that come up. How somebody treats you at court. How does a crown attorney treat you? Or how does another defense lawyer treat you? It opens up this safe space for women to have a conversation. It's a dialogue. And essentially, the listserv has created that safe space.
And Tanya, then in terms of that, I guess intersectionality, right, on top of the diversity and being a woman, right, in terms of how they intersect with respect to now you have an added layer of difficulty you may or challenges you might find when you're going to represent someone that no others may not. Now, how does that kind of contribute? And maybe you could tell a little bit more of sort of the diversity initiatives within Wicked.
Yeah, so within Wicked, I think that, women can come forward in our listserv and be very open about anything that they feel like they've, faced some sort of discrimination, not just based on being a woman, but like, if you're a woman of color, if you're a Black woman, Indigenous woman, any of those types of things as well. And not only mentorship, but there's like also when we share on the listserv, people share cases or how to cross-examine and all these types of things that maybe some women wouldn't feel comfortable asking on different kinds of listservs or asking different people because they don't want to be made to feel that they are, not smart or asking a dumb question. And I think that the listserv here, with the diverse like members on our in our group, makes it more comfortable for people, in my view, and particularly I think for women, and particularly for women of color, and for women that come from different types of groups. So, for example, part of our listserv also has people who were internationally trained lawyers as well, that a lot of the time maybe in other places might not feel as comfortable, but then they can be comfortable on our listserv, which I think we're all proud of.
Perfect. So I want to get everyone's sort of take on this question here. So we'll start with you, Amanda, in terms of we know you've touched on already the challenges of practicing as a woman in Canadian criminal defense, and so maybe you can highlight some of those challenges um, that are faced, as well as perhaps strategies or things, why women are leaving the profession or this area of the profession, and what can be done to kind of stem some of that tide.
So I think big ones are opportunity and money. And so criminal defense, obviously, you can make a good living as a criminal defense lawyer, paralegal, but the reality is the pay structure is different than if you're a corporate lawyer because you're representing as a criminal defense lawyer individuals as opposed to corporate entities, the majority of the time, and there can be some overlap. And so the general salary expectations are lower, and so that's a meaningful consideration, for women, for people of all genders. But, if you're a woman, for example, who's thinking about starting a family, knowing that you're moving into a profession where your ceiling's realistically a little bit lower, criminal defense firms tend to be smaller, obviously, than, corporate firms, especially if you're looking at Bay Street operations, and often have either a very modest or no maternity leave policy. And so criminal defense lawyers, I think, and I run my own firm, I run a small business, we're always in competition with the Crown's office and other areas of practice. And so it's increasingly difficult to get, brilliant young articling students and legal students to come and, want to work in criminal defense when they know, they can go to the Crown Attorney's office, they typically have excellent benefits over there, they have a pension, they've got great mat leave. So we're always trying to compete with that to keep people in the profession. And the timing and the time demands of the profession are really challenging. And so, if you have a family, if you're the one who's, primarily responsible for, the mental and emotional labor of running your household, whether that's kids, whether that's a partner, other family commitments, it can be challenging to balance that. And so I think finding a way to make female lawyers feel supported in this profession, feeling as though they have mentorship and, colleagues around them, and feeling as though there are, systemic supports put in place for mental health, for feeling isolated, for feeling lonely, for feeling the crunch of, how do I take time off from my job, in order to have a family or to pursue, other interests. All of those are challenges that I think we're experiencing, on a day-to-day basis and that we're trying to grapple with for our members. So yeah, I would say, the job itself is a very stressful one. There's, inherent emotional and mental stress that goes along with it. And then also just the practical day-to-day considerations of making money, supporting yourself, supporting a family, and having time to do all those things. So fairly big issues that I don't know we have a solution to today, but I think it's an important thing for us to keep coming back to.
And on that point, then, Hamna, what other do you see any other challenges, or are you facing some of the same ones that Amanda has raised, and how to kind of navigate through them?
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with Amanda because we see a retention of women within the first 3 to 5 years of practice, and everyone sort of either leaves the law or transitions to the Crown's office. But I think some of the really tough challenges that I personally had was just being perceived as a criminal defense lawyer or as a lawyer generally. And I think that really takes a toll on you because you think you've done the hard stuff. You've done law school, you did the bar exam, you finished articling, and you made it. Right now, you get the clients, you do the law part of it, and you just do your job. But it's quite different. No one prepares you sort of for the heat you will get from clients, from the court staff. Um, and because I always talk about this, like when you imagine a lawyer, you really imagine a white male lawyer in a suit. No one's going to picture me, a brown woman with lipstick on, representing them. So when people imagine lawyers, that's what they imagine, a white man, and they want to hire a white man. So early on, I really struggled with getting my own clients and clients that would be willing to pay me, for example, on a private retainer. And that is important. Money is important to make a living. And when you don't get the clients, you start undermining yourself. You start doubting whether you can do the job right because obviously you need to do the cases to get more experience to be able to transition into tougher and tougher cases. So I had to climb that ladder and figure um, what I needed to do to to prove to the world that I am a lawyer, I am good enough. So I think you waste a lot of energy trying to fit in, and I'm 100% over that because I'm now comfortable in my skin. I love being brown. I love being a woman. I love who I am, and I'm comfortable with that. But now that's after 7 years of being in the court and just being myself. So I think these are some of the things we don't talk about enough, and you don't realize that you will also experience this. And not everyone does. I had a colleague in first year who was a white man, and he actually transitioned out of civil law or something. And I bumped into him in court and I was like, hey, how's it going? He's like, it's my first month. And he was so confident going in. He didn't know what was going on, but he was able to bluff. And here I was. I was prepared from my file. I knew all the facts again. And I was like, well, completely undermining myself. So it's also the way we're trained. So I had to sit with myself and be like what is it that I have to do? So that confidence, that pep talk, we all do it. I don't know. I had to do lots and lots of it. And I don't think you're prepared for that coming out of law school. Maybe others experience something different. They're born confident. I was not.
Yeah, it's actually funny, Hamna, because I have a friend who actually worked, at your office years ago, and they would say when they would walk into court with Peter, there was such a discrepancy in height that they always were referred to as his assistant or something, right? Because of that perception. Like, you have Peter, and you're like, oh, this is a lawyer, and this is, someone that's
Peter's
helping.
assistant. Yeah, I actually want to share something. So I actually got introduced to Sweta at Brampton Courthouse because I was with Peter and we were in a trial, and I think it was my first couple of months of being a lawyer. And the judge actually called me Peter's assistant. And I was quite taken aback. I was still learning how to navigate things, and no one corrected the judge. And I didn't think I was confused about how I felt. I felt shame. Being someone assisted is a very proud job, but I did go to law school. I did all the hard work. I didn't want to be called anyone's assistant. And then I moved on, focused on the trial, but I bumped into Sweta in the change room, the robing rooms, and she actually told me that um that's not right and that I should take a stand for myself. And we acknowledge that it's not always to stand up. You're not always up for a battle or standing up for yourself, but she really did empower me in that moment. And I was like, yeah, that's not right. I feel shitty because of that. But you don't always have a voice. It takes time. It took me years, and whoever is next to you, you get compared to them constantly. And that's something obviously I did not enjoy.
Kyle, how about yourself out there in BC? Is it any different there? Is this like a Toronto thing here, or how do you find court appearances there and these same challenges that we're talking about?
No, it's no different here. I mean, everything I think is the same pretty much across the country. We have the same issues with retention. We have the same issues with young women going to the Crown within the first 3 to 5 years of practice. Women getting mistaken for article. I have been practicing for 13 years, and like I know like I look great, but I still get asked if I'm an articled student. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Um, yeah, so it's, that's tough. But I think too, there's like this double standard that a lot of us have to face. Like I'm the queen of shameless self-promotion. And people will come up to me, men, always men, will come up to me and tell me that, what I'm doing is gauche and it's not appropriate, and you shouldn't talk about your successes so much. I even had one of my former law school professors tell me I should talk about the cases I lose more. And I was like, no. People aren't hiring me because I lose cases too. But at the same time, you see those exact same people who are criticizing you doing it themselves, but because they're white men, it doesn't look bad. They're just, occupying that confident space that they get to walk through the world in. And so obviously I'm not going to stop because I've never let somebody tell me not to do something so far. I'm not starting now.
And then Sveta, there on that point there that Hamna brought up, I mean, do you see sort of that same kind of challenge there as well? Like, I mean, as Hamna brought up, again, if you say a lawyer, you have a perception, right? But why is there a qualifier? You're a female lawyer, a woman, in Canadian criminal defense, and how is that impacting, especially people that want to get into the profession? Today was the first day of school. I talked to, my new students, and a lot of the women there want to get into criminal defense in some capacity, and I'm hoping, that some of these issues and these challenges are improved on. But I mean, it's not like it's just happening today. It's been many years of the same issue. So anything that you can add to that?
I think it starts with the name. My name's not that difficult to pronounce, but I've always had to correct it. And during COVID, when we didn't have video, I was always considered Mr. Tejpal as opposed to Miss Tejpal. And then I'd have to correct it. And just to have that impact of correcting somebody, it was like I had done something wrong, for example, right? It was like, oh, why are you correcting me? Like, your video's off, or like, it's not that I can see you. I started, appearing in Brampton around 2011. And, I've been very fortunate with some really good mentors who have provided me files, who have provided me the mentorship that's required. Um, I think what's missing in our profession is a colleague letting you second chair. One of the things is legal aid doesn't want to pay for a second chair, so the lack of opportunities. How is a sole practitioner supposed to give up 4 weeks of, their time for free to second chair like a murder trial, or second chair like a very aggravated sex assault? It's very difficult. Like, a lot of women are on their own. They do not have those supports. And if our male colleagues could just offer one file to us, or extend, an invitation to come and sit and talk about payment, and not, say, okay, yeah, sure, you can second chair, but it's going to be for free. I think that would go a long way of retaining female lawyers in our profession. The other thing is that, you know, the fact that women are going into the Crown's office or other areas, it leaves a gap in the defense bar, because as female criminal lawyers from various backgrounds, we're able to provide perspective that perhaps a white male lawyer would not be able to provide. Especially in a time where we have so many like foreign national student people on student permits, student on visas. Um, they're coming from different backgrounds, they speak different languages. And if we were to just provide women of color, for example, the opportunities to have the skills when that client knocks on the door, we wouldn't have to give that client up, right? So just I think there has to be programs either with the Law Society or other organizations that allow women to take on some of this work, allow women to do the Supreme Court of Candidacies as a second chair. It should be, opportunities should be widely available so that anyone can just say, okay, I've done this. And then they choose, okay, I've done this. Do I like it or do I not like it? But after like 20 years, if the first time somebody charged with, murders coming in, and you've never been able to deal with something like that, I think that's where we have a problem.
And how about you, Tanya, on some of these points there? What maybe challenges that you faced or that you see for women in criminal defense? I mean, as a sole practitioner, especially as you're talking about disconnect from others, like how else can that be better brought together?
So I think too, like I'm in a chamber, so I think there's that where I get the mentorship. We have our own little email list, people you can ask questions to. I did a murder trial with another lawyer in April. It was technically my client, so I wasn't on the ESM panel at that time, so that's how I was able to do it with that lawyer. But I think one of the things that we're talking about with confidence and how we're treated, I think especially as a Black woman as well too, it happens with clients. So it's not even just like judges or crowns or anything. I find that to be less of a thing than it is for clients, assuming that you're not capable, or assuming that only certain types of people could be capable, particularly white males. So I think that is something that happens, and it's sort of, I don't know. I was always, how I was saying she wasn't born with confidence. I think, because I'm an only child. I think that's what it is. So I never had I never was like comparing myself to anybody. So I'm like, I don't need to. I'm just walking around. But it does sort of like where I'm just like, oh, like you sort of question yourself a little bit. So I think for us, I think that what Shweta is saying, I agree with mentorship. I think with having, for example, legal aid and having the second chair being paid for and things like that, because I realized the only cases that I guess I was able to like kind of have another lawyer with me were actually just my own clients that ended up with these serious charges. So I'm bringing somebody on per se, as opposed to the other way around, which then might be more difficult. So I think that other lawyers, I think as well, should step up, because I think what happens is when we have the gap that Shweta is talking about, that's based on the fact of people aren't being mentored, or people aren't feeling sort of not welcome in the profession, but sort of not mentored. So they're just like, okay, I'm just going to go and do this other thing. And then we wonder why the profession maybe is looking the way that it does, because we've lost this cohort of people that are just like, have given up. And I think that's one of the things, is not only just the responsibility of lawyers, but the responsibility of organizations around us. So for example, with the Law Society, when you're talking about the maternity leave program with the Law Society, which is, not that robust, where you can only make $50,000 a year, and then you're getting a small amount of money, and people just simply can't afford to do that. And what people will do when they want to have families is just go to places that there are those benefits. So I think it's not just other lawyers, but it's other lawyers and other organizations that have to come together to ensure that women are continue to be represented in the bar, because we are important, and there's important perspectives from us as women, and a diverse set of women, very important perspectives, and very important ways that we can represent our clients and relate to them as well.
Now, I want to maybe come back at some of these points a little bit later in terms of looking at some solutions or hope for as particular students as they get into the profession. But I did want to make sure we talked about, it's about a month ago. I know some of you have shared your views privately and publicly, but essentially, every criminal defense lawyer, I think at some point, whether it's their own mother would ask them, how do you sleep at night representing all of these individuals? You're letting all the guilty people walk free and such. But now there's a little, added layer for all of you, right? Is essentially, why would female lawyers represent men in sexual crimes, right? There was an article there in the Toronto Star a month ago following the sex assault trial of the hockey players in London. That's almost saying that you're betraying women by representing people who have sexually or allegedly sexually assaulted them. And so again, Amanda, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that? And in both aspects, right? One, in terms of just representing and working in criminal defense, and then two, what was your take on who are your clients and even a response to some of those the article there in terms of some of the sort of characterizations and mischaracterizations of women who practice criminal law.
Yeah, it's a question that you get all the time, at cocktail parties, and I teach sometimes at the Toronto Police College. Without fail, one of the questions that I always get is, how do you sleep at night? And what I always tell people is, one, you only say that because it's not you who's in the position of being charged, or because you don't have a loved one who's in the position of being charged. And so, for everybody who says, how do you sleep at night? The second it's you or your son or daughter or husband or wife or, a parent who's all of a sudden facing a criminal charge, then it's not how can you sleep at night? It's I need to hire the absolute best lawyer that I can afford because this person is in a traumatic and, perhaps unwarranted situation and they need help getting out of it. And so our work is only reprehensible to the people who don't understand it and the people who don't need our help. And the other thing I always tell people is there's a huge amount of honor in our profession. I'm very proud to be a criminal defense lawyer, and our profession, our role as criminal defense lawyers, it's the only constitutionally protected job. And so, the forefathers and foremothers of our country, decided that what we do is significant enough that we're enshrined in the Constitution. No one else is. And so, we uphold those rights every day. And when people ask me about, how do you do this as a woman, I'm a feminist. My background is in feminist philosophy. That's what I did my undergraduate degree before I came to law school. And I find no contradiction in being a feminist and a criminal defense lawyer, because whether you're a man or a woman or however you identify as a lawyer, you're representing the person and not the crime. There's no male to criminal defense lawyer, I assume, who says, I represent drug trafficking or I represent murder or I represent, sex assaults. You represent individuals who are charged, and you do that whether or not you're a man or a woman. And so I see no inconsistency in it. I've always told people I consider myself to be a hired gun. And so, I will represent people who are charged with offenses. I prosecute offenses. I act on behalf of the Law Society. I've acted on behalf of, the Crown Attorney. I represent victims of crime. And whoever my client is, I'm going to advocate for them to the best of my ability and, within the bounds of the law and, the ethical constraints that are upon us. But I don't find myself personally limited in any capacity because of how I identify or how I present present to the world. And so I think that that is I think perhaps an unsophisticated way to look at what we do is to say, you're a woman, and so you shouldn't be representing these particular offenses or particular people. And I also think, kind of looking at it from a more of a maybe, selfish perspective is I want to get the absolute best clients and, I want to do the best possible job for people and I want to build my own career. And saying, as a woman, you have to cut your career off at the knees because of some misplaced, moral obligation that doesn't attach to male lawyers. I'm just not prepared to go along with that.
And Hamna, on that same point there, I mean, is there a reason why, again, that women are calling women out for the work that you choose to do in representing people who are charged with sexually assaulting women in particular? I mean, what is your take on that?
I think that article offended a lot of women practicing criminal defense law. It was very, very offensive because it really minimized our roles and the jobs we do. I think women were also referred to as human shields in skirts. I Firstly, I don't really know many lawyers who wear skirts. It's just, you can wear whatever you want, but it's not about the optics. People don't hire us for our looks. We're not models or, this is a very, very serious profession. Anyone going through a charge of sexual assault wants the best, like Amanda said. They want someone they can trust, who can empathize with them, and that they will do a damn good job. So by saying that we're there just to look good or cute in court, clearly the person writing the article or anyone making such comments has never been in that position. When clients come to us, whether it's for sex assault or anything else, they're very vulnerable. They share things they might not be able to share with others. They share things in confidence, and there's lots and lots of layers to any scenario. So people only know sort of what's portrayed to them in the media, but there's an educational piece needed to teach the public what we do as criminal defense lawyers. And definitely, women are smart, we're hardworking, we give it our best. And this is exactly what we're talking about. This is such crap that women have to deal with in the profession, right? This is the extra baggage. Like you go to court, and then there's the element you're a woman, and all these things we're dealing with. And again, it's, that to take away the credit from the lawyers who did a fantastic job on the Hockey Canada trial and then take away those pieces of it is really misinformed, and it's quite it's just disappointing. So we don't want to give it more energy than it deserves, but I'm in agreement with Amanda said, and likely with anything else anyone else will say.
Yeah, Kyla, how about you? I think you called it a misogynistic mess there. I think you were to those words, something along those lines a month
I
ago.
called it a lot of things. Yeah.
So what else can you add in terms of that? And I mean, essentially just defending, anybody. I mean, if a woman is going to be the complainant, I mean, why are you facing that kind of backlash as opposed to any other criminal defense lawyer representing anywhere else?
Yeah, I mean, you could easily point the criticism the other way around by saying, as a man, you're demonstrating your misogyny by defending men accused of sexual assault, but nobody would, take you seriously if you said that. And, thankfully, I don't think that many people took that article too seriously, especially with all of the backlash it received. Obviously, I don't defend sexual assault cases having nothing to do with my gender, but just having to do with I don't enjoy them. So I do what I enjoy. But I get the same questions, right? How do you defend these people? They kill people and, drunk drivers are bad and blah, blah, blah. And they often will say things like, what if that happened to one of your family members, you would feel differently. And what they don't know is it has. And like, I even have family members in the hospital currently as we're filming this with like life-altering injuries who were hit by an alleged drunk driver. And all I hope is that that person gets the fairest trial they can get. Because I think that's what our system promises. And, if they get convicted, I hope that that conviction is solid. That's, I think, maybe a strange way of thinking about things, but I think it's an important perspective that we have working in this industry is knowing that the best thing somebody can have if they've broken the law is a fair trial with a good defense. because it's never going to be overturned on appeal that way. It's, they're going to get the punishment they deserve, and that's what we should hope for. And so as women, when we're defending people who maybe are accused of harming women, we're doing that very thing that we want. We want them to have every avenue of defense explored so that if they do get convicted, and, when we're acting for our clients, we're trying to keep that from happening. But if they do, it's only because it was absolutely proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Thanks, Kyla. Shweta?
Well, I think if people only understood how hard it is to market yourselves as women and advertise and sell yourself when a client comes in, and you're sitting behind that desk and they're like, well, how long have you been practicing? Or, how many cases have you won? And you're having to like justify over and over and over again how, you're good at what you do. You care about what you do. You're willing to put in the time. You're dedicated to the job. We forget presumption of innocence. That's where it starts, right? So, not, I agree with what everybody has said here. It's frustrating to read articles like that, and particularly when we all know the work that's involved in defending somebody charged with sexual assault. We also see behind the scenes of these charges hanging over these people, the impact, it takes years sometimes. You have different applications. You have to explain to them what the applications are. You have to go through the steps of gathering your evidence for a 276, for a 278 application, putting the affidavits together, ensuring that you have, as a lawyer, I mean, I'm not even talking about women or men. As a lawyer, you want to make sure you have crossed everything off so you can effectively represent your client, right? And, a lot of these people lose their jobs. They're innocent at this point. They haven't even been found guilty, and they lose their jobs. They don't pass the vulnerable sector checks. They could end up being in custody for a long time if they're convicted. So I think that's something that the public needs to be educated on, that it's not as, if you're charged, you're convicted. There are complainants, and we don't take away from that. As a female lawyer, I sympathize with everybody in the system, but we have a job to do at the end of the day. There's an oath that we take as lawyers, and it's to advocate to the fullest. That's what you're there for. So, yeah.
Tanya, how about yourself? I think, before you were sharing a bit, you spoke out on and were, on panels and on TV. And then, it didn't go, in terms of what others perceive of that, right? And on top of everything that we're talking about in terms of these challenges that, and maybe you could share if you want, in terms of what happens when you take those positions publicly.
Yeah, I think people, because it's kind of like going off of Amanda's point of like people sort of recognizing it when it's them or their family member, and they're like, oh, wait a second, I have to do this. And I actually do think I actually am less I don't know. I think people are inherently selfish. So I think that people know full well that like a lot, they might not understand the legal system, but they do know that just because someone is charged, it doesn't mean that they're guilty, because surely they know that when it's their family charged. So they know that it's for other people too. It just doesn't matter because they don't know them, right? So that's where I think that is. But yes, talking about that, like when we as lawyers also come into the public arena, to explain sort of the law around something. I was in the public arena just the other day, this whole big, huge issue in Lindsay, where there was Lindsay, Ontario, I should say. There was a homeowner charged with aggravated assault against a home intruder. And it has brought out a lot of eclectic people that are speaking out about castle law and wanting whatever they do in the US and whatever, all this sort of thing. And it's like, then, you get the personal emails. I just mark them as spam. I don't even read them fully. I just read like one or two sentences of these like long thought out emails, and just put them in the spam spot. And sometimes if I feel a little razzle dazzle, I'll report it. But that's what happens. And like, the insults, the personal insults, the idea that, us lawyers, and, there was someone on Twitter that said, it would be a shame if someone found out where you lived and said you had cash and money laying around and stuff like that, right? So those things sort of happen to lawyers. I just find it funny, and I don't, I'm just like, I trust me, no one will believe I have cash and money laying around, I promise you. So I'm not really that concerned. And also when you're posting from a like, nothing profile, I'm also like like you're scared of your own reflection, like, please, sir. So I'm not really that concerned about it, but it happens where lawyers don't want to speak to the media because they are sort of personally attacked, their emails and all this sort of thing, and that kind of thing happens. And I think especially maybe to like, I'm sure maybe it does happen to men, but I think for women, maybe people feel like, they can insult women, or do certain things because they feel like they won't get an answer back, or whatever it is. And I know I haven't answered anybody back, even if I wanted to, but I have not. Because the internet is forever, so I don't do that. But it's like maybe that's what people feel like they can do. So I feel like in these kinds of circumstances, especially when you're talking about media, it can get dicey for lawyers, and the constant, personal things and whatever else. So I think that for us, it's important that I think that even though those things happen, like, those things don't worry me, they don't scare me. I'm just like, I'll continue speaking out about the law, and because like I am proud to be a defense lawyer, and I'll continue speaking on behalf of people that are presumed innocent, before the law. So those kinds of things don't worry me, but they happen, and I think the public, I think, needs to be, as a whole, less selfish, and understand that just because if they think that their family member likely deserves, a good lawyer and deserves to have a fair trial, then surely, everybody else does, as well.
So with all that, thanks for sharing everyone on this point there. So with all of that in mind, whether you're going to get uninvited to speaking events for what you do, or you're going to get hate mail in all sorts of forms. I'm just thinking about the handful of students that I had just this morning that are like, I want to do criminal defense. Now, what can be done to develop that, right? I mean, as some of you have shared, right, when you first started, you wouldn't necessarily have that maybe the confidence to sort of deal with all of this. You already have a chip on your shoulder, so to speak, and now you add in, well, somebody's going to write this article, or somebody's going to send this, or clients are going to not. So how do you kind of take all of that and offer sort of a path where the option isn't go to the Crown, or leave law, or leave the criminal law particular? What do you think for those who are newer in the profession, or jumping into the profession, or students thinking about it as a profession, to sort of better navigate these challenges so that they don't leave? Or is that something that we're not going to solve today, certainly, but what do you think can be done? And then we'll start with you again, Amanda. In terms of encouragement, to stick it out, and like all of you have, and that there's hopefully a greener path, so to speak, or light at the end of the tunnel. After those first 3 years, you don't need to go and be on the other side of the file now, instead.
So I think finding mentorship is probably one of the most important things that you can do, because the the criminal defense bar is extremely generous with with its time, with its knowledge. And so I was very fortunate. Excuse me, sorry. I started with a one firm. I articled there. I became an associate and eventually a partner before I started my own firm. And so coming up for me, it was invaluable to have, lawyers around me in the firm that I was at who I could ask questions of, and, pick their brains and bounce ideas off of and discuss strategy. And for my colleagues who, came up as sole practitioners or in smaller practices, the environment of being in a chambers, for example, offers that same type of support. Because I think especially as a woman in this profession, when you're junior, you need a champion. You need somebody who's going to say, you can help me write this factum at the Court of Appeal, and then your name goes on the factum. And so when the decision is published, your name is also out there on a reported decision. And when you're very junior, that makes all the difference in the world. And so finding those opportunities where You can have somebody who's going to be pushing you forward. Why don't you take this case on? You be the junior at it. You write the factum. You be the one in court. You take this speaking engagement, or, you take this publishing opportunity. Having somebody in your corner like that is invaluable. And it creates opportunities and puts you in rooms that, once you've got your foot in the door, once you've got that seat at the table, it's much easier to maintain that. The real initial challenge is getting in that door. And so, how do you put yourself in a situation where you're attracting, the types of clients who are going to pay you what you need to be paid in order to continue this practice, or, to be investing in support staff or associates, or, kind of leveling yourself up in terms of advertising, or, the real estate where you're at. And so putting yourself in that position, I think at, the very early stages in your career, just it's invaluable in terms of assistance. And so I think reaching out and seeking out those opportunities for more established members of the bar, it's actually not the hardest thing in the world to do, because people are very, very generous and people do want to help. I've never had an opportunity where I've reached out to senior counsel and said, I'm interested in this case that you're working on, or I know, I read this decision from the Court of Appeal. Do you have time to talk to me about it? Nobody's ever said no. And so I think, putting yourself out there and asking for help and asking for those opportunities is a great place to start.
Hamna?
For me personally, I have to always remember the reason why I entered the profession and remember where I come from, remember my roots. So I come from a Pakistani immigrant family. I came to Canada at a very, very young age, and I grew up with nothing. It was very humble circumstances. So I had to work really, really hard for every single thing I have in my life. And people don't know that about me because I project a certain image about myself. That's part of the marketing side I was talking about. But people don't know who I am. People do not know what I'm made of. I can work hard. I can outwork anyone. You give me a tough job and I'll get it done. So just because someone doesn't like the way I look or the way I sound, have an accent, or whatever the case may be, it's not going to be the reason why I'm leaving the profession. One day, if I decide to leave, it would be on my own terms. So for me, when those tough days do come, I sit with myself, I unpack with a trusted person, usually my husband, who gets tortured with these conversations. But just, I do need to vent to someone, but I have to bring it back home. Like, why? To do this job, you really have to love it. It's not for glory. It's definitely not for money, for prestige. We all of us believe in the cause. We do it for a certain reason, and I have a theory that everyone doing this work has been othered in their life one way or the other. I grew up as an immigrant. I'm used to being in these arenas, feeling like an outsider, always looking in. I'm also a Muslim, so I'm also reminded of how different I am. So I I remind myself I'm tough and I can do whatever I want. It's someone's decision. I'm done with people making decisions for me in my life. And I know it all sounds really cheesy, but really it's the cheesy stuff you have to hone down for you to be able to live your life on your own means and have a career that's meaningful for you. And along with the mentorship, I do want to add that's 100% very important. Like, I really look up to Michelle Johal. I saw her at a impaired driving conference once. She was speaking, and I was just so fascinated by her. I just gravitated towards her after the conference, and all I had common with her was my skin color. And she's not like, I'm very brown, I'm very desi. She's not like that, but just seeing others being in that position, it just gave me hope early on, and we've now become good friends. But her mentorship, even if it's on a very high level, it's meant a lot to me. So you need someone, like Amanda said, you need a champion, and biggest of all, you need to be your biggest champion because no one will be there for you. That's my theory.
Kyla, how about yourself?
My advice is perhaps a little bit more extreme. You got two middle fingers, most people do. So when the one gets tired, you can use the other one to show people where they can go when they try and hold you back. I've always ascribed to the idea of, if I want to be in a space, I'm going to force myself into it, regardless of people wanting me to be there or not. And I think that, unfortunately, is something that you kind of have to do. If nobody's inviting you into the space, you're not going to sit around and wait for an invitation. You're going to make your own. But I also agree, mentorship and forming a network is good. I think I did a lot of, I felt for the many years of my career that I was kind of just like screaming into a void or banging my head against the wall on things. And when I started getting more involved in organizations like the CBA, and then when WICCD was formed and joining WICCD, that's really I think where it's I've just felt so much more comfortable being, the bullish Taurus person I am, because there is this like community of people who I feel like have my back, which is great. It's always nice to have somebody who, or many people who you can turn to and say, hey, I need help here, and they're ready to pick up arms or wield their middle fingers on your behalf too.
Shweta?
I would say get comfortable with being uncomfortable. The profession is such that will test you. It will make you feel like maybe you're not doing the right thing. It will be very lonely sometimes, but you will get through. I agree with everybody. Mentorship, like I've been very fortunate with having mentors in my life that have helped me with getting to the Court of Appeal, that have helped doing really serious trials very early on in my career, especially being a foreign international student from the UK and doing my accreditation. While I was doing the NCAs, I was given an opportunity to do all the immigration board stuff. So I really learned all the immigration law there. And then I was doing trials as soon as I was called. So mentorship was number one. Reaching out to people, don't hesitate, don't be afraid. Nobody thinks you're stupid. Everybody's been there. And in law, it's a minefield. So you may feel like you can't reach out to somebody because your question is very simple, but then you start talking to somebody and it's like, okay, it's not as simple as you made it sound like. So I would say community, build a strong community around you. Find the people who you can call while you're in the middle of a trial, for example, and a question pops up and you ask the judge if you can be excused. You call that person, call another person until you get the advice that you need, because you're there to fight for your client, or advocate for your client rather, and you want to make sure you're comfortable with advocating before a judge and are able to answer any of the questions. So don't be afraid to call. Don't be afraid to stop people in the hallway. You see somebody who's a senior lawyer or just any lawyer, be like, hey, can I borrow you for 5 minutes? This is something that I think prior to COVID was so natural. We would go into these lounge, everybody would be there and they'd be talking about their war stories. And you learned listening to other lawyers talk about how they were being treated or how their cases were doing. And I think it's a disconnect since COVID because we've all come on Zoom and the hallways in the courthouses are quite empty. But my biggest recommendation or advice to a lawyer wanting, or a student wanting to be a lawyer, is call people. Look at the Women in Defense or Criminal Lawyers Association, any organization. People will be happy to chat with you.
Tanya?
Yes, I was just going to say as well, I know that sometimes it's like if it might be lonely if you're kind of new to the country or new to the area, so you don't really know people that you can just build a network with. And one of the things I would suggest is going to CPDs, the ones that are in person, and meeting people that way. So you're killing two birds with one stone, where you're sort of meeting people and creating networks, but you're also being able to learn without, because maybe you're a shy person, you don't really feel comfortable walking up to someone in a hallway that you don't know and asking questions. But then in a CPD, you're learning all the things that are, those things are maybe answering your questions. So you're kind of absorbing in a different way. So I'm very much an extroverted person. So I sometimes realize I'm probably annoying. So I realize that other people have different ways of sort of interacting. And I think that's one of the things, is really going to CPDs. I remember that was one of my first things. I just went to the CLA conference. It was actually now Justice Lorianne Thompson, who was just one day just saw me in the courthouse in Brampton. It was just like, what office are you working at? And I was like, oh, I'm at this other office. And she's like, oh, are you going to the criminal lawyers conference? And I was like, no, I don't think so. It's very expensive. She's like, no, you should make it happen. And I was like, okay. And I showed up, and then, meeting people that way. And I got to meet like different mentors. Like one of them, I always like call him out as Daniel Brown. I've met him, and he's, had a hand in like really kind of mentoring me and going on my own and sole practitioner work and all that sort of thing. So I think like, and that's all through just like going to different things and meeting people at those places. So it might not be that you have the network, because like some people are first generation lawyers. Like there's no one in my family that's a lawyer. There's no one else I can ask those questions to. But then when you attend events and meet people, so I really think putting yourself out there, so not necessarily walking up to random people, but also just participating in events, and people will kind of start to see you around and sort of interact with you as well. So that's um one of my pieces of advice as well too, for a different way for people who kind of maybe communicate differently with other people.
Perfect. So first of all, or last of all, I guess, thanks so much for all of you for taking the time and joining us. I also want to especially extend thanks for inviting paralegals and paralegal students to be part of your organization. I know of a lot of paralegals, for example, they can't join the Criminal Lawyers Association. I mean, I guess they're not lawyers, but I mean, again, they're looking for mentorship, and that door is closed to them. And since you've been able to take on, I believe the numbers of paralegals and paralegal students has grown within your organization, and I'm especially appreciative last month, Hamna and a number of others that are not here were able to talk to the students there and share, again, the same kinds of experiences and provide that mentorship, because for all of them, you're those champions that they see, and they're like, well, I want to be like Amanda, I want to be like Hamna, I want to be like Hyla, like Shweta and Tanya. And again, it's important to see that and see these success stories, because again, the more and more that leave the profession, the fewer and fewer champions are going to be there for women rising through and starting in the ranks to look up to and get those opportunities to be second chair or assist. And so congratulations for all that you're done. I guess the last question there is, any final words of wisdom or anything else you wish to add? And once again, thank you so much for joining me. Amanda?
I would say it's worth it. If you want to be working in criminal defense, whether that's as a lawyer or a paralegal, the people with passion for this work, they find a spot for themselves within it. They create a niche for themselves within it. And it's just the most rewarding, fascinating career. When I talk to people, at cocktail parties, when they ask me, how I sleep at night, the one thing I say to them, at the end of that conversation is, I've never once been bored. And so, for me, this is what I always wanted to do. I've never been bored. It's hard sometimes. Sometimes you think, God, what do I need this for? Being in front of a jury or a difficult judge, or, dealing with a difficult client. But at the end of the day, you're helping people in a very integral, important, an intimate way for their lives, with huge, ramifications for them. And you get to hear, interesting stuff every day. You get to hear, the juiciest gossip, you can imagine on a daily basis. And, you get to do interesting, thought-provoking work. So it's absolutely worthwhile. And if people are interested in making this their career, I want to encourage them in doing it, because it's given me a lot. And, it's how I plan to spend the rest of my life.
Thanks, Amanda. Hamna?
For me, my message to any students wanting to pursue a career in criminal defense would be to, go for it, to set those difficult goals. You will make them happen. Enjoy the journey. It may not be like others' journey, but it would be your journey. So stay strong and honestly, just be unapologetically authentic. Be yourself. Do not try to be a white man. If you're not a white man, it will never happen. So just be you, do it the way you are meant to do it, and enjoy it and be proud of it, like all of us are for our jobs.
Thanks, Hamna. Kyla?
I don't know that I have any like profound final words of advice to add, but I will say, like, if anybody's watching this and anything I've said has resonated in any way, or you just want to, have somebody to talk to, I'm very easy to find on the internet, and you can reach out, and I will always make time for law students and young lawyers. So I would encourage people to reach out to me.
Yeah, I think the two middle fingers there can't be topped there. So um, thanks again, Kyla. Shweta?
I'm with Hamna. Just be yourself. It's easier when you're not worried about being somebody else, and you're authentic, and you bring a skill set to the profession that perhaps nobody has, and you're content with yourself. That's your superpower.
Thank you so much. And finally, Tanya?
Yeah, I would agree with being yourself, because I think that those kinds of things not only attract clients but keep clients as well too. When you're thinking about that, you don't need to just be a cookie cutter of what you think a lawyer's supposed to do or what they're supposed to act like. I think especially as a Black woman, I feel like there's there's a fair amount of Black people, more than the population, that are represented in the criminal justice system. So I always think it's important that my voice is there, and important that it's there in an authentic way, that people can relate. So remember, I think that's really important, to just be yourself and present the things that are different about you into this profession, which then make it as rich as it is.
Perfect. So thanks again for all of you for joining us. And thanks for anyone who's been tuning in. And as always, I'll share the information there. But if you are a lawyer or paralegal, a female, and or identify as such, please make sure if you're not already a member, to join WICCD. There's lots of great resources. And again, always thankful and appreciative of everything you've done for my students over the years, whether individually or as an organization. And thanks again for joining us, and thanks for tuning in. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.